Paradise Lost, a modern English translation. By John Milton. Preface from Harmony. Dear listeners, in this book I have retold the legend of Paradise Lost in a modern English method, retaining, however, as far as possible, the expressions and metaphors of John Milton in his original writing. Book 2. The Argument. Invocation. The consultation begins. Satan debates whether another battle should be risked to reclaim heaven. Some advise for it, while others argue against it. A third proposal, previously mentioned by Satan, suggests investigating the truth of a prophecy or tradition in heaven about another world and another type of creature, equal or nearly equal to themselves, that is supposed to be created around this time. They wonder who should be sent on this difficult mission. Satan, their leader, volunteers to go alone. He is honored and applauded. The council ends, and the rest disperse to various activities as their inclinations lead them, to pass the time until Satan returns. He journeys to Hell's gates, finds them shut and guarded. They eventually open, revealing the great chasm between hell and heaven. With difficulty he passes through, guided by chaos, the ruler of that place, to see the new world he seeks. End invocation. High on a throne of royal state, far outshining the wealth of Ormus and Ind, or where the opulent East showers barbaric pearl and gold on its kings, Satan sat exalted, raised to this ill-fated eminence by merit. Uplifted from despair beyond hope, he aspires to pursue a futile war with heaven, his proud imaginations displayed, powers and dominions, deities of heaven. Since no depth within her gulf can hold immortal vigor, though oppressed and fallen, do not consider heaven lost. From this fall, celestial virtues will rise more glorious and more formidable than without a fall, fearing no second fate. Although just right and the fixed laws of heaven first created me your leader, free choice and merit in council or battle have further established me on a secure throne, yielded with full consent. In heaven, which follows dignity, the happier state might provoke envy from inferiors. But who here will envy the highest place that exposes its holder to the greatest share of endless pain? Where there is no good to strive for, no faction can arise. No one in hell will claim precedence or covet more pain with an ambitious mind. With this advantage, we now return to claim our old inheritance, more likely to prosper than prosperity could assure. Whether through open war or covert guile, we now debate. Whoever can advise may speak. He ceased, and next to him, Moloch, a king with a scepter, stood up, the strongest and fiercest spirit that fought in heaven, now fiercer by despair. His trust was in being deemed equal in strength with the eternal, and he preferred not to exist rather than to be less. With that care lost, he lost all fear of God, hell, or worse, and spoke these words, "My vote is for open war. I boast no expertise in cunning. Let those who need it contrive. While they plot, millions stand in arms, waiting to ascend. Should we linger here, heaven's fugitives, accepting this dark, shameful den as our dwelling? No! Let us arm ourselves with hell flames and fury, and force our way to heaven's high towers, turning our torments into weapons against the torturer. Let him hear infernal thunder, and see black fire and horror shot with equal rage among his angels. His throne itself will be mixed with Tartarian sulfur and strange fire, his own invented torments. Though the way may seem difficult and steep to scale with upright wings against a higher foe, let those who still feel the effects of that forgetful lake remember that in our proper motion we ascend to our native seat. Descent and fall are adverse to us. Did we not recently feel the fierce foe hanging on our broken rear, insulting and pursuing us through the deep? With what compulsion and laborious flight we sank this low? The ascent is easy then. The outcome is feared. Should we provoke our stronger foe again, some worse way may his wrath find to destroy us, if there is fear in hell of being worse destroyed. What can be worse than dwelling here, driven out from bliss, condemned in this abhorred deep to utter woe, where unending fire torments us without hope of end, as vassals of his anger? When the scourge inexorably and the torturing hour call us to penance, we will be more destroyed than thus. We should be utterly abolished and cease to exist. What do we fear then? What doubt we to provoke his utmost ire? Which, enraged to the height, will either consume us entirely and reduce our essence to nothing, happier far than miserable to have eternal being. Or if our substance is indeed divine and cannot cease to exist, we are at worst on this side nothing, and by proof, we feel our power sufficient to disturb his heaven and perpetually alarm his fatal throne, which, if not victory, is yet revenge. He ended frowning, and his look denounced desperate revenge and battle dangerous to anyone less than gods. On the other side rose Belial, more graceful and humane in action, a fairer person heaven had not lost. He seemed composed for dignity and high exploits. But all was false and hollow, though his tongue dropped manna and could make the worse appear the better reason to perplex and confound maturest counsels, for his thoughts were low, industrious in vice but timid and lazy in noble deeds. Yet he pleased the ear, and with persuasive accent thus began, I should be much for open war, O peers, as not behind in hate, if the main reason for immediate war did not dissuade me most, casting ominous doubt on the whole success. When he who excels in arms and counsel grounds his courage on despair and utter dissolution, aiming for dire revenge, what revenge? Heaven's towers are filled with armed watch, making all access impregnable. Often their legions camp on the bordering deep, or with obscure wings scout far and wide into the realm of night, scorning surprise. Or if we could force our way and all hell should rise in black insurrection to confound heaven's purest light, our great enemy would sit on his throne, unpolluted, and the ethereal mold, incapable of stain, would soon expel her mischief and purge off the baser fire, victorious. Thus repulsed, our final hope is flat despair. We must enrage the almighty victor to spend all his rage, and that must end us, that must be our cure, to be no more. Sad cure! For who would lose, though full of pain, this intellectual being, these thoughts that wander through eternity, to be swallowed up and lost in the wide womb of uncreated night, devoid of sense and motion? And who knows if this would be good, whether our angry foe can grant it, or ever will? How he can is doubtful, that he never will is sure. Will he, so wise, let loose his ire all at once, through impotence or unawareness, to grant his enemies their wish and end them in his anger, whom his anger saves to punish endlessly? Why cease then, say those who counsel war? We are decreed, reserved, and destined to eternal woe. Whatever we do, what more can we suffer, what worse? Is this then the worst, sitting, consulting, armed? What when we fled, pursued and struck by heaven's thunder, and sought shelter in the deep? This hell then seemed a refuge from those wounds. Or when we lay chained on the burning lake? That was surely worse. What if the breath that kindled those grim fires awakes and blows them into sevenfold rage, plunging us into the flames? Or from above, should intermitted vengeance arm again his red right hand to plague us? What if all her stores were opened and hell's firmament spouted her cataracts of fire, impendent horrors threatening one day to fall on our heads, while we, planning glorious war, caught in a fiery tempest, shall be hurled, each on his rock transfixed, the sport and prey of racking whirlwinds, or forever sunk under the boiling ocean, wrapped in chains, there to converse with everlasting groans, unrespited, unpitied, unreprieved. For ages of hopeless end. This would be worse. Therefore, open or concealed war alike my voice dissuades. For what force or guile can work against him, or who can deceive his mind, whose eye views all things at once? From heaven's height he sees and derides all our vain motions, as almighty to resist our might as wise to frustrate our plots and wiles. Shall we then live so vile, the race of heaven thus trampled, thus expelled to suffer here chains and these torments? Better these than worse, by my advice, since fate inevitable subdues us, and omnipotent decree the victor's will. To suffer, as to act, our strength is equal, nor is the law unjust that ordains this. It was resolved from the start, if we were wise, to contend against such a great foe, so uncertain of the outcome. I laugh when those bold with the spear shrink and fear what must follow, to endure exile, ignominy, bonds, pain, the conqueror's sentence. This is our doom now. If we can sustain and bear it, our supreme foe may in time remit his anger, and perhaps, thus far removed, not mind us, satisfied with the punishment. These raging fires will slacken, if his breath stirs not their flames. Our purer essence will then overcome their noxious vapor, or endure it unfelt, or changed, will become familiar with the fierce heat, void of pain, This horror will grow mild, this darkness light. Besides, what hope the never-ending flight of future days may bring, what chance, what change worth waiting for, since our present lot, though ill, is not the worst, if we procure no more woe for ourselves. Thus Belial, with words clothed in reason's garb, counseled ignoble ease and peaceful sloth, not peace. And after him, Mammon spoke, either we unseat the King of Heaven by war, if war is best, or we regain our lost right. To unseat him, we may hope, when everlasting fate yields to fickle chance, and chaos judges the strife. Hoping for the former is vain, as is the latter, for what place is there for us within heaven's bounds unless we overpower heaven's supreme Lord? Suppose he relents and offers grace to all, on promise of new subjection. With what eyes could we stand humbly before him, accepting strict laws to celebrate his throne with hymns, and sing forced hallelujahs to his Godhead, while he sits as our envied sovereign, and his altar breathes ambrosial odors and flowers, our servile offerings? This must be our task in heaven, our delight. How wearisome to spend eternity worshipping one we hate. Let us not pursue this, by force impossible, by leave unacceptable, though in heaven. Rather, seek our own good from ourselves, live for ourselves in this vast recess, free, accountable to none, preferring hard liberty to the easy yoke of servile pomp. Our greatness will be most conspicuous when we create great things from small, useful from harmful, prosperous from adverse, thriving under evil, and finding ease and pain through labor and endurance. Do we dread this deep world of darkness? How often does heaven's all-ruling Sire choose to reside amidst thick clouds and darkness, covering his throne with majesty, from whence deep thunders roar, resembling hell? As he endures our darkness, cannot we imitate his light when we please? This desert soil has hidden luster, gems, and gold, nor do we lack skill or art to raise magnificence. What more can heaven show? Our torments may in time become our elements, these piercing fires as soft as now severe, our temper changed into theirs, removing the sense of pain. All things invite to peaceful counsel and settled order, to best manage our present evils, with regard to what we are and where we are, dismissing thoughts of war. You have my advice. He had scarcely finished when such a murmur filled the assembly, like when hollow rocks retain the sound of blustering winds that all night rouse the sea, now lulling seafaring men whose ship anchors in a craggy bay after the tempest. Such applause was heard as Mammon ended, his advice for peace pleasing them. They dreaded another field worse than hell, so much the fear of thunder and Michael's sword still worked within them, and no less desire to found a new empire here, which might rise through policy and long process, in opposition to heaven. Beelzebub, perceiving this, rose with grave aspect, seeming a pillar of state, deliberation and public care engraved on his brow, princely counsel shone in his face, majestic even in ruin. Sage he stood, with Atlantean shoulders fit to bear the weight of mightiest monarchies. His look drew audience and attention, still as night or summer's noontide air. While he spoke, thrones and imperial powers, offspring of heaven, ethereal virtues. Must we renounce these titles, and be called princes of hell? The popular vote inclines to continue here and build a growing empire, doubtless. While we dream, unaware that the King of Heaven has doomed this place our dungeon, not our safe retreat beyond his arm's reach, to live exempt from heaven's jurisdiction, but to remain in strict bondage, though far removed, under his inevitable control, reserved as his captive multitude. For he, be sure, in height or depth, will reign sole king, losing no part of his kingdom by our revolt, but extending his empire over hell and ruling us here with an iron scepter, as he rules heaven with a golden one. What then are we planning, peace or war? War has determined us, defeated us with irreparable loss. Terms of peace are either offered nor sought. What peace will be given to us enslaved but severe custody, stripes, and arbitrary punishment? And what peace can we return, but hostility and hate, untamed reluctance, and slow revenge, ever plotting how to thwart the conqueror's joy? Nor will we lack occasion, nor need we dangerously invade heaven, whose high walls fear no assault or siege, or ambush from the deep. What if we find an easier enterprise? There is a place, if prophetic fame in heaven is true, another world, the happy seat of a new race called man, about to be created like us, though less in power and excellence, but favored by the ruler above. This was pronounced among the gods and confirmed by an oath that shook heaven's circumference. Let us bend all our thoughts there, to learn what creatures inhabit, their nature, power, and weaknesses, how best to attack, by force or subtlety. Though heaven is shut and its ruler secure, this place may lie exposed, the utmost border of his kingdom, left to its defenders. Here, perhaps, some advantageous act may be achieved by sudden attack, either with hellfire to waste his whole creation or possess it as our own, driving out the puny inhabitants. Or if not drive, seduce them to our side, making their God their foe, who with a repenting hand may abolish his own works. This would surpass common revenge, interrupting his joy and raising ours in his disturbance, when his beloved sons, hurled headlong to join us, curse their frail origin and faded bliss. Advise if this is worth attempting, or should we sit in darkness hatching vain empires? Thus Beelzebub pleaded his devilish counsel, first devised by Satan, and partly proposed, for whence but from the author of all evil could such deep malice spring, to confound mankind in one root, mixing earth with hell to spite the great Creator? But their spite serves only to augment his glory. The bold design pleased those infernal states, and joy sparkled in their eyes. They voted with full assent. Whereupon he continued, Well have you judged, well ended long debate, synod of gods, and resolved great things, which from the deepest depths will lift us up again, in spite of fate, nearer our ancient seat, perhaps in view of those bright borders, where with neighboring arms and timely excursions, we may chance re-enter heaven, or else dwell in some mild zone, not unvisited by heaven's light, secure, and at the brightening dawn purge off this gloom, the soft, delicious air, healing the scars of these corrosive fires, shall breathe balm. But first, whom shall we send in search of this new world? Who is sufficient? Who shall dare the dark, bottomless, infinite abyss, find his way through the palpable obscure, or fly with indefatigable wings over the vast chasm, to the happy isle? What strength, what art, can suffice, or what evasion ensures safe passage through the strict sentries and thick stations of angels watching round? Here we need all circumspection, and no less choice in our vote, for on whom we send, the weight of all, and our last hope, relies. He said and sat, his look held suspense, awaiting who would second, oppose, or undertake the perilous attempt. But all sat mute, pondering the danger with deep thoughts, each reading his own dismay in the other's countenance, astonished. None among the choice champions of heaven's war could be found so hardy as to offer or accept the dreadful voyage alone, until at last Satan, now raised above his fellows in transcendent glory, with monarchical pride conscious of highest worth, unmoved, spoke, O progeny of heaven, imperial thrones! Deep silence and hesitation have seized us, though undismayed. The way is long and hard, that out of hell leads up to light. This vast prison, a huge convex of fire, surrounds us ninefold, and gates of burning adamant, barred over, prohibit all exit. If anyone passes these, the void profound of unessential night receives him next, wide gaping, threatening utter loss of being in that abortive gulf. If he escapes into any world or unknown region, what remains but unknown dangers and as hard an escape? But I would ill become this throne, O peers, and this imperial sovereignty, adorned with splendor, armed with power, if difficulty or danger could deter me from attempting. Why do I assume these royalties, not refuse to reign? If I refuse to accept an equal share of hazard as honor, due alike to him who reigns, and even more hazard to him who sits highest. Go therefore, mighty powers, terror of heaven though fallen, tend to our present misery here, while I seek deliverance for us all abroad. This enterprise none shall share with me. Thus saying, the monarch rose, preventing all reply, wisely, lest others among the chief, raised by his resolution, might now offer, certain to be refused, what they previously feared, and being refused, might stand as his rivals, cheaply winning high repute, which he must earn through immense hazard. But they dreaded the adventure no less than his forbidding voice, and at once with him they rose, their rising like thunder heard from afar. They bowed with reverence, extolling him as equal to the highest in heaven. They failed not to express how much they praised his self-sacrifice for the general safety, For even the damned spirits retain some virtue, lest bad men boast their specious deeds on earth, which glory excites, or ambition varnished with seal. Thus they ended their dark consultations, rejoicing in their matchless chief, as when dusky clouds ascend from mountain tops, while the north wind sleeps, spreading over heaven's cheerful face, the lowering element scowls over the darkened landscape, with snow or shower. If the radiant sun with farewell sweet extends his evening beam, the fields revive, the birds renew their notes, and bleating herds attest their joy, ringing hill and valley. O shame to men! Devils with devils hold firm concord. Men alone, though hopeful of heavenly grace, disagree. God proclaims peace, yet they live in hatred, enmity, and strife, waging cruel wars, wasting the earth, each to destroy the other, as if man had not enough hellish foes waiting day and night for his destruction. The Stygian council thus dissolved, forth came the grand infernal peers, their mighty leader in the midst, seeming alone the antagonist of heaven, no less than hell's dread emperor, with supreme pomp and godlike state. Around him, a globe of fiery seraphim enclosed with bright emblazonry and horrific arms. At the end of their session, they bid cry with trumpets regal sound the great result, toward the four winds, for speedy cherubim put to their mouths the sounding alchemy, explained by herald's voice. The hollow abyss heard far and wide, and all the host of hell returned with loud acclaim. Their minds somewhat eased and raised by false presumptuous hope, the ranged powers disband, each wandering his way, as inclination or sad choice leads, seeking respite from restless thoughts, entertaining the irksome hours until their great chief returns. Some on the plain or in the air sublime, on wing or in swift race, contend as at the Olympian games or Pythian fields. Some curb their fiery steeds, shunning the goal with rapid wheels, or form fronted brigades, as when war appears in the troubled sky, warning proud cities, and armies rush to battle in the clouds. Before each van, airy knights prick forth and couch their spears, till thick legions close. With feats of arms from either end of heaven, the sky burns. Others, with vast Typhoon rage more fierce, rend up rocks and hills, riding the air in whirlwind. Hell barely contains the wild uproar, as when Alcides, crowned with conquest in Oechalia, felt the envenomed robe, tearing through pain up Thessalian pines by the roots, and through liches from the top of Ada into the Euboic Sea. Others, more mild, retreat to a silent valley, singing with angelic notes and many harps their heroic deeds and hapless fall by doom of battle. They complain that fate binds free virtue to force or chance. Their song, though partial, suspended hell, enchanting the audience. In sweeter discourse, others apart sat on a hill, reasoning high on providence, foreknowledge, will, and fate, fixed fate, free will, foreknowledge absolute, wandering in mazes without end. They argued much about good and evil, happiness and final misery, passion and apathy, glory and shame, all vain wisdom and false philosophy. Yet they could charm pain or anguish, excite fallacious hope, or arm the obdurate breast with stubborn patience like triple steel. Another group, in squadrons and bands, boldly adventured to discover wider regions of that dismal world, seeking easier habitation, marching along the banks of four infernal rivers that disgorge into the burning lake, abhorred Styx, the flood of deadly hate, sad Akron of sorrow, black and deep, Cocytus, named for loud lamentation heard on the rueful stream, fierce Phlegethon, whose waves of torrent fire inflame with rage. Far from these, a slow and silent stream, Lethe, the river of oblivion, rolls her watery labyrinth. Whoever drinks of it forgets his former state, both joy and grief, pleasure and pain. Beyond this flood lies a dark, wild frozen continent, battered by perpetual storms of whirlwind and dire hail, which on firm land thaws not, but heaps ruin of ancient piles, all else deep snow and ice. A gulf profound is the Serbonian bog between Damiata and Mount Casius, where whole armies have sunk. The parching air burns cold, and cold acts like fire. Thither, by harpy-footed furies, all the damned are brought at certain times to feel the bitter change of fierce extremes, from raging fire to starve and ice their ethereal warmth, immovable, fixed, and frozen for ages, then hurried back to fire. They ferry over this Lethean sound, augmenting their sorrow, struggling to reach the tempting stream, to lose all pain and woe in sweet forgetfulness with one small drop, so near the brink, but fate withstands, and Medusa with Gorgonian terror guards the ford, making the water flee from living white, as it once fled Tantalus's lips. Thus roving in confused, forlorn march, the adventurous bands viewed their lamentable lot with shuddering horror, finding no rest. They passed through many a dark and dreary vale, many a dolorous region, over frozen and fiery Alps, rocks, caves, lakes, fens, bogs, dens, and shades of death, a universe of death, created evil by God's curse, where life dies, death lives, and nature breeds all monstrous, prodigious things, abominable, unutterable, worse than fables have feigned or fear conceived, gorgons, hydras, and dire chimeras. Meanwhile, the adversary of God and man, Satan, with thoughts inflamed of highest design, put on swift wings, and toward hell's gates explored his solitary flight, sometimes scouring the right coast, sometimes the left, now skimming the deep with level wings, then soaring high to the fiery concave. As when a fleet is descried far off at sea, hanging in the clouds, sailing from Bengala or the Isles of Ternate and Tidor, bringing spices, they stem the trading flood nightly toward the pole, so seemed the flying fiend. At last hell's bounds appear, high reaching to the horrid roof, with thrice threefold gates, 3 of brass, 3 of iron, 3 of adamant rock, impenetrable, impaled with circling fire, yet unconsumed. Before the gates sat a formidable shape on either side. One seemed woman to the waist, fair, but ended foul in many a scaly fold, voluminous and vast, a serpent armed with a deadly sting. Around her middle, hellhounds barked incessantly with wide Cerberean mouths, ringing a hideous peal. When they chose, they crept into her womb if disturbed, and kennelled there, yet still barked and howled unseen. Far less abhorred than these, Scylla vexed the sea that parts Calabria from the hoarse Trinacrian shore. Nor uglier followed the night hag, riding through the air to dance with Lapland witches, lured by the smell of infant blood, while the laboring moon eclipsed at their charms. The other shape, if it could be called a shape, had no distinguishable form, black as night, fierce as 10 furies, terrible as hell, shaking a dreadful dart. What seemed his head bore the likeness of a kingly crown. Satan, now at hand, saw the monster moving toward him with horrid strides, hell trembling as he strode. The undaunted fiend admired what this might be, not feared, God and his Son accepted, he valued nor shunned any created thing, and with disdainful look began, "Whence, and what art thou, execrable shape, that dare, grim and terrible, block my way to those gates? Through them I intend to pass, without your leave. Step aside, or learn by proof not to contend with heaven's spirits." To whom the goblin, full of wrath, replied, "Are you the traitor angel who broke heaven's peace and faith, leading a third of heaven's sons against the highest? For which you and they were cast out, to waste eternal days in woe and pain here. Do you count yourself among heaven's spirits, hell-doomed, and defy and scorn me, your king and lord? Return to your punishment, false fugitive, and add wings to your speed, lest with a whip of scorpions I pursue your lingering, or with one stroke of this dart bring you horrors unknown." The grisly terror, speaking and threatening, grew tenfold more dreadful. On the other side, incensed, Satan stood undeterred, like a comet burning in the Arctic sky, shaking pestilence and war from his horrid hair. Each aimed deadly at the other. Their fatal hands intended no second stroke. They frowned like 2 black clouds charged with heaven's artillery, about to clash over the Caspian, waiting for winds to signal their encounter in midair. So they stood, hell growing darker at their frown, matched. Never but once more would they meet so great a foe. Great deeds were at hand, which would have echoed through hell, had not the snaky sorceress, who kept the fatal key by hell gate, risen with a hideous outcry and rushed between. "O Father, why raise your hand against your only Son? What fury possesses you, O Son, to aim that dart at your Father's head? Do you know for whom? For him above, who laughs while you, his drudge, execute his wrath, which he calls justice, and will one day destroy you both." She spoke, and the hellish pest paused. Then Satan replied, "Your outcry and strange words prevent my hand. I will spare until I know what you are, double-formed, calling me Father and that phantom my Son. I know you not, nor have I seen a sight more detestable than you both." The portress of Hellgate answered, "Have you forgotten me, deemed so fair in heaven, when at the assembly, in sight of all the seraphim, you conspired against heaven's king? Suddenly, miserable pain seized you, your eyes dimmed, your head swam in darkness, while flames poured from it, until opening wide on the left, I, shining heavenly fair, armed like a goddess, sprang from your head. Amazement seized all heaven's hosts. They recoiled at first, calling me sin, and seeing me as a portent. But I pleased, and with attractive graces won the most averse, especially you, who saw your image in me and became enamored, finding secret joy with me, which led to my womb conceiving a burden. Meanwhile, war arose, and battles were fought in heaven, clear victory to our almighty foe, loss and rout to our part through the Empyrean. Down they fell, driven headlong from heaven's height, into this deep. I also fell. Then this powerful key was given to me to keep these gates forever shut, which none can pass without my opening. Pensive I sat alone, but not long until my womb, pregnant by you, grew excessive, felt prodigious motion and rueful throes. At last, this odious offspring, your own, breaking violent way, tore through my entrails, transforming my lower shape. He, my inbred enemy, emerged, brandishing his fatal dart. I fled, crying out death. Hell trembled, sighing from all her caves, echoing death. I fled. He pursued, inflamed with lust more than rage, overtaking me, his mother, with forceful and foul embraces, begetting these yelling monsters, that ceaselessly cry and surround me, conceived and born hourly, causing infinite sorrow. When they choose, they return to the womb that bred them, howling and gnawing my bowels, their repast. Then bursting forth again, they torment me with conscious terrors, giving no rest. Before my eyes, grim death, my son and foe, sits in opposition, setting them on, and would devour me, his parent, for want of other prey, but knowing his end is tied to mine, that I would be a bitter morsel and his bane. So fate pronounced. But I warn you, O father, shun his deadly arrow. Do not vainly hope to be invulnerable in those bright arms, though heavenly tempered, for none, save the one who reigns above, can resist that mortal wound. She finished. The subtle fiend quickly learned his lesson, responding smoothly, Dear daughter, since you claim me as your sire, and show my fair son, the pledge of our dalliance in heaven, joys now sad to mention through unforeseen, unthought of dire change, know I come not as an enemy, but to free you in him, and all the heavenly host who fell with us, armed with just pretenses. I go on this solitary, uncharted mission, exposing myself alone to tread the unfounded deep and search the vast void for a foretold place, created vast and round, a place of bliss near heaven, inhabited by upstart creatures, perhaps to fill our vacant room, though more removed, lest heaven, overfilled, might stir new conflicts. Be it this or something else, I hasten to learn, and once known, will soon return, bringing you to where you and death shall dwell at ease, unseen, winging through the air, embalmed with odors, fed and filled immeasurably, all things shall be your prey. He ceased, as both seemed pleased, and death grinned horribly, his maw blessed for the good hour to come. His mother also rejoiced and spoke to her father, I keep the key of this infernal pit by command of heaven's all-powerful king, forbidden to unlock these adamantine gates. Death stands ready to interpose his dart against all force, fearless of being matched by living might. But what do I owe to his commands above, who hates me and thrusts me into this profound gloom, to sit in hateful office, confined, a heavenly born inhabitant of heaven, in perpetual agony and pain, surrounded by my own brood that feed on my bowels? You are my father, my author, you gave me being. Whom should I obey but you? Whom follow? You will soon bring me to that new world of light and bliss, among the gods who live at ease, where I shall reign at your right hand in luxury, as your daughter and darling, without end. Saying this, she took the fatal key, sad instrument of all their woe, and rolling her bestial train to the gate, lifted the huge portcullis, which none but she could move, turning the intricate wards, unfastening every bolt and bar of iron or solid rock with ease. Suddenly, the infernal doors flew open with impetuous recoil and jarring sound, thundering harshly, shaking the lowest depths of Erebus. She opened, but could not shut. The gates stood wide, allowing a bannered host to march through with horse and chariots. The gates cast forth smoke and flame like a furnace mouth. Before their eyes, the secrets of the hoary deep appeared, a dark, boundless ocean, without dimension, where length, breadth, and height, time, and place are lost, where eldest night and chaos, ancestors of nature, hold eternal anarchy, amidst endless wars and confusion. Hot, cold, moist, and dry, for fierce champions strive for mastery, bringing their embryonic atoms to battle. They swarm around their flags, light-armed or heavy, sharp, smooth, swift, or slow, unnumbered as the sands of Barca or Cyrene's torrid soil, siding with warring winds, balancing their lighter wings. To whom these adhere rules briefly. Chaos sits as umpire, embroiling the fray to maintain his reign. Next to him, chance governs all. Into this wild abyss, the womb and perhaps grave of nature, neither sea, nor shore, nor air, nor fire, but all mixed in their pregnant causes, ever fighting unless ordained by the Almighty Maker to create more worlds. Into this wild abyss, the fiend stood on the brink of hell, pondering his voyage, no narrow strait to cross. His ears were filled with loud and ruinous noises, as when Bellona storms with all her engines to raise a capital city, or less than if heaven's frame were falling, and elements mutinied, tearing earth from its axle. At last, he spreads his sail like wings for flight, surging through the smoke, lifting off the ground, ascending many leagues as in a cloudy chariot, audaciously riding the vast void, until meeting a vast emptiness, his wings fluttering in vain, plummeting 10,000 fathoms deep, continuing to fall until a tumultuous cloud, instinct with fire and niter, rebuffed him, hurling him aloft, that fury quenched. He landed in a boggy Syrtis, either sea nor land, nearly foundered, he treads the crude consistence, half walking, half flying, needing both oar and sail. As a griffin pursues the Arimaspian through the wilderness, guarding his stolen gold, so the fiend eagerly traverses bogs, steep, straight, rough, dense, or rare, with head, hands, wings, or feet, swimming, sinking, wading, creeping, or flying. At length, a universal hubbub wild of confused sounds and voices assaults his ear with loud vehemence. He presses on, undaunted, to meet whatever power or spirit of the abyss may reside in the noise, seeking the nearest path from darkness to light. When behold, the throne of chaos and his dark pavilion spread wide on the wasteful deep. With him enthroned sat Night, eldest of things, his consort, and by them stood Orcus and Aides, and the dreaded Demogorgon, rumor, chance, tumult, confusion, and discord with 1,000 mouths. To them, Satan boldly turned, powers and spirits of the abyss, chaos, and ancient night, I come not as a spy, but wandering this dark desert by constraint, seeking a path through your empire to light, alone and half lost. What path leads from your gloomy bounds to heaven? Or if some other place, one from your domain, is possessed by the ethereal king, I travel this profound to reach it. Direct my course. It will benefit you if I reclaim that lost region, expelling usurpers, restoring it to darkness and your sway, my present journey, raising once more the standard of ancient night. You gain the advantage, mine the revenge. Thus spoke Satan. The anarch old, faltering in speech and visage, answered, I know you, stranger, that mighty angel who recently led a revolt against heaven's king, though overthrown. I saw and heard. Such a numerous host fled not silently through the frightened deep, ruin upon ruin, rout upon rout, confusion worse confounded. Heaven's gates poured out millions of victorious bands pursuing. I keep residence on my frontiers. All I can muster defends the little left, still encroached by internal strife, weakening old night's scepter. First hell, your dungeon, spreading far and wide. Now heaven and earth, another world linked to my realm, a golden chain to heaven from whence your legions fell. If that way is your path, you are near, closer to danger. Go, and speed. Havoc, spoil, and ruin are my gain. He ceased. Satan, glad his sea had found a shore, sprang upward with renewed force, like a pyramid of fire, into the wild expanse, winning his way through the fighting elements, harder beset than Argo passing through Bosporus, or Ulysses steering between Charybdis and the other whirlpool. With difficulty and labor, he moved on, with difficulty and labor he, but having passed soon after man's fall, sin and death, following his track by heaven's will, paved a broad and beaten way over the dark abyss, enduring a bridge from hell to the world, by which perverse spirits pass to tempt or punish mortals, except those guarded by God and good angels. But now at last the sacred light appears, shooting from heaven's walls into night's bosom a glimmering dawn. Here, nature begins her farthest verge, chaos retreats, as from her outworks, a broken foe with less tumult and hostile din. Satan, with less toil, wafts on the calmer wave by dubious light, like a weather-beaten vessel reaching port, though with torn sails and tackle, or in the emptier waste, weighing his spread wings, leisurely beholding far off the imperial heaven, adorned with opal towers and sapphire battlements, his native seat. And near, hanging in a golden chain, the pendant world, as small as a star near the moon. Thither, full of malicious revenge, accursed and in a cursed hour he hurries.